If Spain is a destination you can't wait to explore, this week's episode of the Global Travel Planning Podcast is for you. We're sharing the highlights of our recent trip to Madrid, Seville and Barcelona, including our favourite tours, how we got around, where we stayed and what we'd do differently next time. Hi and welcome to the Global Travel Planning Podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Collins, who with my expert guests will take you on a weekly journey to destinations around the globe, providing travel inspiration, itinerary ideas, practical tips and more to help you plan your next travel adventure. Hi everybody and welcome to episode 51 of the Global Travel Planning Podcast. This week Doug and I are here to talk all about our recent time in Spain, but we have again our lovely guest interviewer Melissa, who is our resident Aussie every month in the Brit, Aussie and Yank episode that we have, where we share general travel tips. So Melissa again has agreed to come on and do the interview, and as she did for the Morocco episode. So welcome, Melissa.
Thank you, Tracy and Doug. Well, we're here to talk tonight about your trip to Spain. So how about we start with just a general overview about your trip?
Okay, should I start with you?
You start, yeah.
Okay, so we literally spent 3 weeks in Spain, divided up actually by 1 week in Portugal. So we actually flew from Morocco. At the end of our trip from Morocco, we flew from Marrakesh to Madrid, spent a couple of days in Madrid, then went down to Seville for 12 days before heading over to Portugal for a week, and then flying over to Barcelona for 7 days. So basically it was Madrid, Seville and Barcelona that were for 21 days.
That's right, in total, yeah. We didn't actually stay in Barcelona itself, but I'll explain that later.
Yeah.
Okay. So why did you decide, and Spain's a big place obviously, why Madrid, Seville and Barcelona? Like what drew you to those particular cities?
Well, Madrid initially, because neither of us have been there, and because we were in Morocco, when we were looking at options to get into Spain, we saw good deals on the flights from Marrakesh to Madrid, so it seemed to tick a few boxes at once, really.
Yeah, and then after that, we were trying to decide where else to go. So then we felt we wanted to do a few train trips, actually. That was part of also what we wanted to do in Spain. And neither of us had been to Seville, so we decided to head down to Seville. And then it kind of made sense to go into Portugal. And our original plans were actually to go to northern Spain after Portugal. Where we're going to go?
Well, I wanted to go from Porto in Portugal up to Santiago de Compostela for the to see basically the sites there, and then work our way around northern Spain to the Basque area, and then down into Madrid.
And then back to Barcelona.
And then down to Barcelona. That was the initial plan. Unfortunately, the Renfe, the Spanish trains were going to be on strike. So it wasn't just 1 or 2 days. It was 3 or 4 days in a week. So
it was over a few weeks.
Yeah,
it was just going to be impossible. Yeah,
we couldn't make any concrete plans. So we decided to bite the bullet and book a flight. But unfortunately, within an hour of booking the flight, they called the strikes off.
And we couldn't believe it. It literally was one of those moments where we sat and went, right, we have to make a decision now because we were kind of booking things as we went. And so we had that flexibility. When we were like, that was the plan, was to go northern Spain. But it was just not going to work because of the strike. So we just went, no, we're just going to have to fly to Barcelona. And I'm not joking. I think it was 10 minutes after we booked the flight, non-refundable flight, they called off the strike. And I think we just went, okay, right, we'll just have to call it a day and we're going to go to Barcelona and that's what we're going to do. So we just kind of, sometimes you have to just have that flexibility and go with it.
I mean, anyone who knows me knows my love of trains, all things trains. So you can imagine my disappointment. And nothing against flying, but I'd rather be on a train.
Well, I'd always rather be on a plane as well, on a train rather than a plane, I should say. But anyway, that's what we did. So it ended up being kind of shortened our time that we wanted to spend in Spain, but it just means that we'll have to go back again.
Yeah, basically.
Absolutely. And what about where did you stay in each city, and how did you choose where you stayed?
I think Madrid, we just stayed in a hotel for a couple of nights. We flew in and just got a transfer and stayed in a hotel kind of in a central part of Madrid.
Yeah, not far from the palace.
Yeah. So because we knew we were going to do a couple of tours, so that was going to be the easiest place to stay. But Madrid was actually very short. We were only there for a couple of nights. And then because we had quite a lot of things like washing to do, and also when you're traveling long term, you have to think about expense. And staying in hotels means that you have to paying out for food all the time in restaurants. So we decided that we'd book apartments. So in Seville, we actually were only going to go to Seville for a week, but we really liked Seville. So we loved it, didn't we?
We
loved Seville so much that we extended it by another 5 days. So we, unfortunately, the accommodation that we had, which was a huge apartment, in a
home.
it was a lovely part of Seville as well. We had to move from that closer to the bus station because we were actually catching a bus to Lisbon.
Yeah.
So we had to move accommodation. Then that was a part hotel. And then in Barcelona, we actually stayed south of the city. We stayed in a town called Sitges. And again, we had another apartment with a washing machine because, again, just trying to keep on top of things like washing. And also we could have our own breakfast, take things a little bit easier. You know, when you stay in a hotel, hotels are lovely, but you have a certain time for breakfast. Whereas, you know, if you're in your apartment, you get up, you kind of eat what you want, do what you want. But things like just the practicalities of keeping on top of washing and things.
That's right. And some days, because of the weather, there were work days as well. And we also looked at feedback on the strength, the quality of the Wi-Fi as well, which was also a factor.
Yeah, that was actually really important because because unfortunately, I'm sure we'll get onto it. We've not had the best weather, and we have to work when we're on the road. It's not just we love just to travel and that, but we have to work. So recording podcasts and doing consults and writing articles and all, it has to be done. So having to making sure we had good Wi-Fi in the apartments it actually worked pretty well, to be honest. So we're able to do everything that we need to do. And all the places were central. I say Sitges we stayed in, which is south of Barcelona. It was somewhere that I'd never heard of it. Doug wanted to go there.
Yes, it was a place I visited frequently with my parents when I was very little, and we went, consecutive number of years. So I was trying to work out, did I say sort of 30 odd years since I was last there? So it was a bit of a return to childhood, so holiday location, which was really nice, to be honest with you. I remembered a few little bits and pieces, didn't I?
I actually loved it.
Where
I loved
the beach
Sitges.
was.
yeah. But I absolutely loved Sitges. It was actually nice not to be in Barcelona, which is crazy. Even this time of year, it's crazy busy. So because it is the most popular destination in Spain.
Yeah.
And it just is crazy busy. So it was actually nice getting on the train and going out and going south to this and staying beside the beach. It was just lovely.
It was, because the accommodation was close to the train station, close to a good supermarket as well. And it gave me an opportunity every time we went into Barcelona to experience the local train service there called Rodalies, which, in all truthfulness, was a bit of a challenge at times. But, that's part of the adventure, and I enjoy the railway challenge. But no, it was a nice place. It's a nice place of life in Sitges as well, which was nice.
I'll link in the show notes to the 4 different accommodations that we had in Spain. I will put a link to those. But but pretty good. Yeah, no complaints.
So we've talked a little bit about how you guys got around between and within the cities, but did you want to talk about that, expand on that, and any tips or insights you've got from travelling around?
Well, I like using metros. Obviously, like the London Underground. The metro system in Madrid was very good, very identical in a lot of ways, with the different coloured lines. So the principle was the same. The ticketing is slightly different because we could buy one travel card in Madrid, which was for the both of us, which is different to London, where you have an Oyster card each. So we could we loaded it with 10 single journeys. And obviously that would be 5 each travelling together. And that worked very well in Madrid. And then, as I said, in Barcelona, the local service is Rodalies, which covers into the city as well. So it's, again, coloured lines. And it's like many other metro systems around the world. Once you got your head around it, the principal lines where you're staying and where you want to get to the main tourist areas, it's pretty straightforward and easy to use. So besides metros and walking.
Yeah, I mean, places like Seville are very walkable city anyway. And we did use the fast train, though, when we went from Madrid down to Seville, which was pretty good.
That was excellent, yeah. It took a few hours, and we upgraded on that one to the first class as well. I should mention Madrid, Seville and Barcelona have a tram system as well, a light rail system. obviously the size of the cities determines how many lines that they have, which looks very efficient as well.
But Seville doesn't really go in the
no, there's only the one line. There's only the one line,
So you don't really see that.
No.
But
it runs at the back of the palace.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Yeah, just thinking about it. Got mixed up with all these different cities, but yes, but pretty easy to get around. I don't think we had many problems. Actually, the most difficult trip we had was our trip from Sitges to Barcelona to the airport, because we had to change trains. And obviously we've got suitcases with us, and none of the escalators were working, and there were no lifts. So we both had to carry upstairs like 20 kilograms suitcase up a long escalator, and then back down again as well, because it neither going up or down. So that was really difficult. I was not in the best of frame of minds by the time we'd done that.
No, and a bit discouraging. There was no staff around to help or advise either, which was a bit.
No, and that would have been a struggle. So anybody, it was difficult for us to do. And actually, there was an elderly couple that were coming down, and they in Spanish were saying to us like, "You're going to have some strength," or like doing the showing the muscles, going to be this, because it was a big escalator to carry all the suitcases.
But we're looking at alternatives, because Sitges is pretty close to Barcelona Airport. So when we arrived, we took an Uber, didn't we?
Yeah, normally,
which is straightforward.
Yeah.
And then we thought we were being smart, because the pont was so close to Sitges train station. We thought we were being smart by taking the metro.
No,
obviously.
So you can imagine how many times I said, "This is why I booked a transfer. This is why I booked a transfer. This is why I get a taxi." So I did say that it's because of those things you can't plan for. It seemed like the easiest way to do it. It ended up being a nightmare.
It did, and the train line to the airport went to the wrong terminal as well.
Yeah.
So then we had quite a faff getting from Terminal 2 to Terminal 1.
Yeah, so it was a pain.
So when it took us about 30, 40 minutes to get from Barcelona Airport to the accommodation, it took over an hour and a half to get back to the airport.
Yeah, so my advice, honestly, is if you decide to stay in Sitges, which I would highly recommend rather than staying in Barcelona, just get a transfer, get a taxi to the airport. Do not do what we did. Honestly, we never do that. It's the first time we've done that ever, and it was not a good idea.
We won't be doing it again.
Let's talk about some of the things you did there, like your tours and experiences. I think you said you did a couple of tours, food and historical history sort of tours. So what were your favourites? What were the highlights?
Oh, we did quite a few tours. Now, I'm going to start off with the 3 tapas tours that we did. Well, actually, we did 4. We did 3 specific tapas, like history of the food, trying the food, tours in Seville and Madrid and Barcelona. But in Seville, we also did an additional tapas tour, which was a tapas and flamenco tour, which I have to say was one of the best tours. I love food tours anyway, but because you learn about the history and you meet the locals and you go into the local places where they have the food, that you know that the food is like genuine, authentic. But marrying that tapas tour with the flamenco that we saw, I've never seen anything like that. It was incredible. And we had a Sophie who was a guide. So massive shout out to Sophie, because you were amazing. And she's been to 500 or so of these shows, and she said this is one of the best ones she'd ever seen. So I would highly recommend that. That was with Devour. We did all of the food tours with Devour, so thanks very much Devour for inviting us onto those tours. As I say, we did 4 with Montse in Madrid, which was fantastic. So and that was some of the most amazing food. Honestly, it was fantastic. And then obviously in Seville, we did two tours there, food tours, and then we had the final one in Barcelona with Ariana on, which was just last week. And Ariana was
also amazing.
Excellent. It was just so good, because you don't just learn about the food, you learn about the history, you get to eat in local places, you just learn so much. And also, I mean, you do get the food and the drink, which is fantastic. So they were just made us so much. In fact, so much we're in Istanbul at the moment, and we're doing a food tour tomorrow. Because it's just a wonderful way to learn about a place through the food culture. But honestly, I have to say, one of the absolute highlights, I will never, ever forget that flamenco.
No, it was absolutely outstanding. I saw it when I was a little lad, and my memory had held fast. It was just as exciting, just as
fabulous,
passionate. It was just unbelievable experience.
Really,
and of course, Andalusia is the home of flamenco.
Yeah, that's where it comes from. And, it's just fantastic. Honestly, they're so talented. And we also did some walks tours. We did Seville in a day with Alba, who is going to be one of my all-time favourite tour guides ever. I absolutely loved Alba. Alba was amazing. We did a reel showing Alba in which you can see on our Instagram. I'm following her on Instagram now. She follows us. Just amazed. She was so lovely, wasn't she?
She really was. We went and had lunch with her.
Yeah, we had lunch with her afterwards because we went on this tour and it was just me and Doug. So we ended up having a private day. I know. Yeah. How lucky were we? Yeah. It was incredible.
So all I can say, with all the devour and the walks or the guides, they've chosen their staff well because they all demonstrate such passion and a real love for the whole topic.
They're storytellers.
They are, and they have that right balance between the history of the towns or cities and the food part. They do seem to have it well planned out.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic. So that's the devour ones, and then the walks tours as well. Like saying the guides are just fantastic. Alba was amazing, and then in Barcelona we recently did a Gaudi tour as well with walks, which was amazing. Yeah. So obviously we went to La Sagrada Familia, which I saw 20 years ago, and my goodness, how different! It's nearly finished, and it's beautiful. Yeah. It's absolutely beautiful. And then we went to Park Güell again, which I went to 20 years ago. Remember, but it's the first time you'd been.
It was.
Yeah. And then we did Casa Bachlo, which I'm going to pronounce completely incorrectly, which is another one of Gaudi's houses that he designed. And so that was fantastic, and it's really lovely. I mean, you associate Gaudi, Barcelona, and Gaudi kind of go hand in hand. So I think. Have an appreciation of that. Again, our guide Oliver was very good. He really
same passion.
Exactly, it was passion. Excellent. We did do a day tour to Granada and Alhambra, which we took from Seville, which we just booked through another company through Get Your Guide, and I think that was probably our most disappointing tour. Actually,
yeah, the weather didn't exactly help for the day either, to be truthful. But it was a bit large group. It was a full coach size party, and.
I mean, large, we're talking like maybe 48, 50 people, something like that. And, you can see the difference between that tour and something like, if you go on the walks tours where there's maximum like 15 of you, it's like, it's so different. And it was a little bit, no offense to the guide and the Alhambra, it just was a little bit boring. I think it was just a little bit too much information and detail. There's a certain amount. You know what? I think the difference is you need to have the stories to go with it, because if you just tell people the history, it gets a bit, I don't know, I used to be a history teacher. It gets a bit dry and boring. It becomes a lecture. Rather than they're like, tell us the stories about the place. The thing I always remember, is just thinking about the fact that in Alhambra, the sultans had red hair, which I'll always remember that because she was telling the story of that, because it's not what you kind of expect. So that was really interesting. But otherwise, it was a very, very long day. I think if I did that again, I'd stay in Granada.
Oh, it was 13 hours. Yeah. But another thing with the large groups, everyone is less inclined to ask questions and interact with the group. In a sort of, 10, 12, 15, it's easy to mix with other members of the group. True.
Yeah, and also, I'm also going to say, to be honest, we'd just been to Morocco, so I think everything was held up against so I was a little bit, I'm going to get shot down in flames by this, I'm sure. But the Alhambra, I guess, I was a bit disappointed by it. I just expected it to be, I don't know, to impress me more.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think after Morocco, and I did actually say, I think I said it on my Instagram stories, like, don't go to the Alhambra when you've just been to Morocco, because you're going to hold up against that. Yeah. So, yeah.
Then the weather didn't help that day, to be fair.
No, true.
Well, talking about weather, let's talk about the weather overall while you were in Spain, and, what was it like and how did it impact your travel?
Well, the saying goes, the rain in Spain falls mainly on the plane, but it didn't. The rain in Spain fell mainly on me and Doug, to be honest. I think Spain,
wherever we were in Spain.
Spain had like the worst March I think they've had for I think every single day it rained. I won't even talk about Portugal, because Portugal ended up being a complete wash up. Portugal was even worse. Yeah, we did have some Madrid, it rained every day. Seville, we did have some sunshine, which thank goodness. So it was more showers. We did have a couple of days of torrential rain. Barcelona, thank goodness. We actually, this is ironic though. We flew out from Porto we left beautiful sunshine, and we actually got delayed. In fact, we were delayed on the runway in Porto for an hour or so because we couldn't land in Barcelona because there was such bad weather and thunderstorms. So we had to be delayed. Anyway, we eventually landed in Barcelona, beautiful sunshine. So I will not complain, because honestly, for most of that week in Barcelona, we had beautiful sunshine and lovely weather, and we were able to sit on the beach. And at the times when we weren't going off to Barcelona to do stuff or walking around Sitges, we could just have an hour or so on the beach and relax and enjoying some sunshine, which I have been craving.
I actually read a book as well, which was nice.
All right. Well, let's just talk overall. Any tips or recommendations that, anything you learned from your trip and your time in Spain?
Well, I've actually just put an article together of 12 tips for anybody visiting Spain for the first time. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And we've also written a guide to visiting Seville, and I'm finishing off a guide to visiting Barcelona from what we've learned from this trip as well. I mean, Spain is somewhere that I'd visited many times as a child, many times as I was growing up. It's very popular with British visitors, and Doug had been many, many times before. So it was kind of nice to rekindle that, but also kind of to learn a little bit more about, visiting Spain in 2025 and what it looks like. I think for me, I would just say, if you plan to visit Spain, read our articles, because we've literally just been. So you've got up-to-date information about all the places we've visited and getting around, and also some tips if it's a first-time visit. And then I don't know, for you, Doug, what would be your one tip?
Well, it's a similar advice to I give to visiting the UK, is to try as far as possible to keep your travel plans flexible. Yeah. And new piece of advice as well is, we wouldn't have found out about the train strikes if we didn't try and keep, on top of local news as well, because we wouldn't have known. Not speaking Spanish, we would not have known. So it's only by chance we did actually find out from the guide in Seville.
I think it was actually, it was Alba.
She mentioned it.
Yeah.
So, where possible, keep your plans flexible. Not always easy, particularly with families. You do need that more rigidity in your planning, but as much as possible, keep on top of local news where possible to find out if your plans can be impacted.
And it's just have that flexibility. I mean, we weren't expecting to have so many days of rain, but luckily we packed layers, we had raincoats, we'd just bought some cheap umbrellas, and you just got to go with it. Train strikes happen, the weather can be awful, but, at the end of the day, we had a wonderful time exploring Spain. We met some fabulous people on our trips. We met some amazing guides. We've tried some wonderful food, and again, some fantastic experiences. So, we thoroughly enjoyed it. So, if you're considering visiting Spain in 2025, go for it. Absolutely.
Most definitely.
All right, one last question for each of you. Tracy, just tell us off the top of your head, what was your favourite thing that you did, saw, experienced?
It's going to have to be the flamenco. I just couldn't, and I know Doug's probably going to want to say the same, but I cannot tell you just how fantastic the whole experience is. It really just carries you away. We went to, off the top of the head, I can't remember the place in Seville. It just reopened again. And I know that the guy that he really wants the kind of like the authentic experience for anybody who goes there. And I think that while they say who's going to be on that night, it may change even up to an hour or so before. And generally the performers will not have met each other. They will never perform again together. So they just arrive, they decide on the style they're going to do, and then they just go for it. So it's really improvised. It's so that is what's incredible. You kind of know that they haven't practiced this night after night after night. They just turn up, they talk to each other about whichever style they're going to do, and then they just go for it. I mean, like it's incredible.
It's super cool.
Oh yeah,
not choreographed.
No, they just go for it, and so that was fantastic, and obviously the food, but the flamenco, I'll never forget that. It really was so amazing, and I have put some videos on Instagram, and we're going to do YouTube video as well. And we have got, because you can't take video or photos during the actual performance, but they do like a little mini performance at the end where you can, because you don't want to during it because you're so immersed in it.
I'll just say that, because that'll be my experience as well. The standout, because you cannot help not to be moved by the flamenco. You can see everybody.
Yeah.
Just their eyes are just fixed on it from the first minute to the last minute. You just cannot take your eyes off it. So, when they say you can't take photos and videos, it's actually in your favour.
Yeah.
It's in your
Yeah.
because you would miss it. And Sophie said beforehand, don't just watch the performers, but watch the guitarist, the musician, because they lead. Watch their eye movements, the little flickers. They're
looking at each other all the time. That they're literally looking at each other, watching each other, and then that will kind of motivate them to whatever they do next. It's incredible. Yeah. It's such the relationship between all those performers. And like I said, they might never have met and may never ever perform together again.
But the professionals.
It's incredible, absolutely incredible.
And my other one really was to return to Sitges after all those years was special because you're not sure your memories of a 5 to 6, 7-year-old are actually real ones or not, or just manufactured in my head. But there's little bits and pieces that just came back to me. And I said, we can go down that road there, we can turn up there. Are you sure? And I went, well, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Times, wasn't it?
Yeah, you were.
I don't know how, but that was pretty special.
Yeah. So that was really good. And when he said it was 30 years since he's been there, and if the last time you were there was 7, it's certainly longer than 30 years.
Okay. Ish.
You're not 37,
I think he wishes.
Okay, maybe a bit off there. Yeah.
Well, you've given us a great overview of Spain. It took me back. I was in Spain last year myself, and I love Spain so much. So, I definitely say just go to Spain. It's so much fun. But anyway, thank you so much for giving us that overview and letting me interview you again.
Well, I'm going to say, Melissa, thank you so much for coming on and agreeing to do it. It's great. I'm probably going to be asking you to do exactly the same thing about Istanbul in a few weeks' time as well. I'm actually sure you kind of are a resident interviewer. So if you just want to remind our listeners exactly where they can find you as well, because obviously if you're listening every month you're on, but
yeah, sure. Sure. Thank you, Tracy. Yes, well, you can find me on Thrifty Family Travels, where I have my family travel, or my local pages are the Queensland Travel Guide and Brisbane Travel Guide.
Perfect. So you can find a link to Melissa's websites and the show note and all the places we talked about and the articles in the show notes for this episode, which will be at globaltravelplanning.com/episode 51. But that just leaves all of us to say until next week's episode, happy global travel planning. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Global Travel Planning Podcast. For more details and links to everything we discussed today, check out the show notes at globaltravelplanning.com. Remember, if you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on your favourite podcast app, because your feedback helps us reach more travel enthusiasts just like you. Anyway, that leaves me to say, as always, happy global travel planning.